Ready to face your fears head on, conquer them, and create a safer, more prosperous future? Worried that the world has gone ing nuts and you've become an insanity magnet? Then grab a cold libation, put on your fuzzy slippers, and get ready to create your own safe space. It's the Safe Space Podcast with your host, Tammy D. For more information and episodes, go to www.saferpodcast.com. That's www.saferpodcast.com.
But it's always a little dangerous when an artist tries to revise something that is so beloved, like we said. What was your impetus? What was your musical goal regarding this project? And tell us a little bit. Actually, I think a lot of people are I hate to say it, a lot of people may not even been born when this came
That's
out.
when one really starts to feel their age. You realize that you're celebrating something that is a lifetime for other people. So yeah, I mean the project kind of came about with kind of the merging of two thoughts in my mind. One was that just on the surface, Kansas was 25 years old. And it just seemed kind of interesting, that number. It's like a time mark that we tend to celebrate, and it was kind of going by, and it had been coming up for a while, and a few of my friends and people around me were like, wow, can you believe it's been 25 years? So there was a sense somewhere in there that needed to be celebrated, largely because there are a lot of people who really love this record and are very attached to it. And in that 25-year time, particularly in the view of Christian evangelicalism, there's been a pretty massive shift between when that record's come out and now. And any, especially even within my career and my own, coming out, my own journey with it. So there was something about that landmark that seemed worthy of, at least taking a moment to do something in recognition of that. The second idea was that I'd been toying around for quite a while for the fact of doing a record that was a little bit more symbolic of and audibly sounding a little bit more like what I've been doing over the last 10 years, which is largely playing solo acoustic shows. I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest connection that I have with the people that I've traveled with over these last 25 years have been usually when I'm going out and doing shows and it's just me and my guitar, right? I've done heaps of arena shows and lots of festivals and full bands and touring, and I did a lot of that in the contemporary Christian world, but this last 10 years, it's largely just been me connecting with my audience. And it's to me been like one of the joys of coming back to music. I mean, I really genuinely love performing that way. So I had in my mind of doing and I'd had it for a while, of doing a project that was more evocative of what I'm doing, just every day when I go out and do my road, nothing, overly produced. That being said, because I do notice like that, the songs sound different or the performances are a little bit different. So those two ideas kind of merged together, and I started talking with the producer of this record, Steve Hindelong. He and I have known each other for a very long time, and but had recently reconnected. And he's a percussionist, and we just sat down together and started kind of playing these just fun together. I wanted to do like a pared down recording of it. And so that's kind of initially what I thought this record was going to be. I really thought that I was going to do just just almost like an archive to just so that I would have a kind of like a little bit better than demo quality recording. And when I thought, while I was going to re-record these songs once and for all, kind of like for my last time and my last revisitation of it. But yeah, so we ended up, what came out of it was just kind of reapproaching the record. It just gave me a time as an artist to kind of really dive into those songs. And as I started to work with these songs with Steve, we, I wouldn't say this record's overproduced. I mean, it's actually really basic. It has a very much, it's not a true live record, the kind of where I started and what I was thinking of, because it just started to bring in other friends and people who kind of shared in that journey. I don't think anyone who played on the record is under 50. I mean, we're people who actually really understood the last 25 years. And there's something about the re-recording of this project that developed a narrative now that I'm pretty happy to have met. And I'm skipping ahead a lot, but I think in talking about what's happened inside of, people who had that religious experience from the 1990s and the early, aughts, that there's a story to be told there, and it's a really interesting phenomenon. I think that even in revisiting these songs, I think people will find a track that um, find the pathway to kind of re-celebrating that journey with a record that started them kind of on that and went through them with that, and the same thing, but it's got a different flavor. I mean, we're all a little bit different than 25 years ago. Our belts have another couple notches opened up in them,
Mine have
and
several.
we have a few more gray hairs, and we've got a lot of experience in between that. And there's something really magical and extraordinary about a song that can move through with that. And I don't think it makes it greater. I don't think, it makes any set of music greater or better than one or another when, we have music that reminds us of when we were 15, right? And it stays in that space. But then there's those kind of records and songs and bodies of work that kind of move with you throughout your life. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. And I'm not sure for me personally, I'm not sure without going into the studio and really sitting with these records that I would have even been able to take in the full gravity of that. I mean, I think I understood it a little bit before, and I definitely took that in. It's been the connection with, these songs and the people that I've met along the way and that we've talked with and shared this journey together has been unquestionable. But to be able to go in and kind of forget about the stage and forget about the rest of the world and just sit in a dark room and play these songs, the way that I did in the studio was very much akin to when I was writing them, all those years ago. So it's a really lovely experience, and I think people will really connect with it.
I think so too. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else why this album resonated with me, but except for myself, and I know that somebody gave me a demo CD back in the old days. You remember CDs?
Yeah.
And somebody gave me one. It had a couple of your songs on it, and I just found it captivatingly honest and fresh. It sounded like nothing else I had heard in the tiny little Christian music genre bubble. Everybody tried to be very derivative, and it's not. I'm not going to indict just Christian music for this. Music in general. If something works, people tend to want to just copy it. So, take a shortcut and copy it, and everybody starts sounding the same after a while.
Sure.
And it's happened with all the innovators, but this sounded honest and fresh. And then shortly after I got this CD, you performed at a church in Napa. It was like 1999, 98, 99. It was it was a favor I think you did to somebody you knew there. And it was packed. It was packed out with these kids. And I remember clearly, and this is how you haven't changed, Jennifer Knapp, over these years. I remember clearly you being on stage and people were just going crazy, almost giving you a standing ovation before you started playing, similar to Cornerstone. And you looked out in the audience with this very bemused look on your face, like, why? Why? Why am I here? Why do these people, what is it in my music that's causing this reaction with these people? And I think I still see that. I still see that even today, you're a little bit surprised that people love your stuff so much. Is that true? I mean, do you find yourself kind of like, wow?
I mean, yeah, there's certainly that. I think, after all these years to, I mean, that still happens for sure, going out on it. I'm not a new artist anymore, right? So when I go into any given room, I know the faces that are there. It's pretty extraordinary in that regard. But it's still humbling, and I don't. I'd be to be if I'm being really honest. When I listen to my music, it's something that I hear all the time, right? So it's a little. I'm not a huge fan of myself. I mean, I think I've met artists that love themselves, and really dig listening to their own records and are really, I'm fascinated by that because I do like what I do. And when I write a song, it's definitely an emotional experience for me. And I love the process and I love performing, a lot of the songs that I write. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But I think as the years have gone on, how humbled I am that people connect to this music. And I think it's taken me a long time to actually kind of understand that. Like especially I think maybe in the earlier days of my career where, and maybe this is kind of like when I don't want to like make it an ageist statement, but like when I was younger and particularly in contemporary Christian music industry, and we're talking about, this was my very first record. So in that kind of time frame, there's always kind of this sense when you're working in the industry, right? When you're in the entertainment work and this is your job, your survival depends on a lot of people liking you. So it's kind of a popularity contest in that regard. And I think even at that time, I hadn't written a lot of songs. So it took me another decade yet in front of that to really kind of identify with myself being an artist or a creator. Um, the parts of so it blows my mind that like inside of CCM where everybody marketed, and there weren't a lot of chick rocker guitar girls like me. So it's like, oh, I'm winning a popularity contest where there isn't a lot of competition, or that people really like it, but do they like me, or are they connecting to the music? And it was sometimes really hard to connect with my audience because we had big rooms and I was kind of detached from having the social connection to people. But I even to this day, I mean, I think through time that it took me a while to kind of funnel between what is popularity and what is genuine thanks from an audience. What is a genuine appreciation for it? And not that I was wanting to judge or needing to judge either one of those, but when I go out on stage now and that happens, there's a sense of just hospitality now that I have to kind of encounter. I mean, people really genuinely attach to music, and I think audiences express that. I know that I do to the artists that I enjoy and that have been with me in my journey of life, right? The soundtrack to my life, which includes other artists like the Indigo Girls or Tracy Chapman. And when I've even run into some of those artists in real life, I don't even know what to say. Like I'm always stunned when people know how to talk to me because I have not successfully navigated any conversations with the artists that are on the soundtrack of my life. Like I just turn into a dumb, drooling idiot because I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. So I've kind of attached to that and I understand what that feels like to a degree. So when I'm in that space, I actually remember most of the time when that's happening or like an audience stands up and is applauding and sometimes even before I play, just grateful that we're all in the same room together. I listen to the words of my wife that have been echoing in my head for 20 years, and she just says to me, just say thank you. Just stand there and accept that and say thank you, because I'm more inclined to talk my way through something or tell a story or kind of
You joke, you
want
joke
to.
around a lot. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to kind of take those compliments, and because it's uncomfortable, it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's vulnerable, right? To have somebody look you in the eye and say, I genuinely appreciate the gift that you've offered, and this is why it means so much to me. I mean,
Cool.
I am so grateful over the years that I hate saying I never know what to say. Like my audience, my fans, my community really
Your
is
groupies. Your
probably.
groupies.
Oh, yeah. But like like the folks that I've been having a conversation with throughout this time. I mean, what I've loved about my career 2.0 is that I've actually feel really connected. I know the names, I know the faces. I know the stories behind their lives. We know each other, I think, to a degree, and I deeply appreciate that. And so that connection for me, when somebody bothers to sit and listen, especially in this world, right, where social media content is now down to TikTok, right? It's not even it's now less than 15 seconds. If you don't have somebody's attention in the first 7 seconds or something like that, people move on. So I deeply appreciate the kind of effort that it takes when our lives are busy to go out to get up, take a shower, get dressed, go out to dinner, go, sit in a room and listen to somebody. It's so crazy to me to
Find
spend
parking in
45.
LA.
Yeah, find parking in LA, like things like that, whether it's a small town or a big town, there are all these excuses and all of these distractions and all of these other things genuinely going on in our lives, that to be able to take time out to come to this one place. At the end of the day, this is all, I realize I'm rambling, but at the end of the day,
Right.
what it really reminds me about, and what I really take seriously, is the opportunity that I have in that space to be able to preserve that for all of us. Like, that is something that we all came together at that point, and I'm humbled to be asked to do that. I am, that it goes well beyond a popularity of a song. Like, hey, did I write a great song? That's not why everybody came. Like, we came there to experience something that is deeply meaningful and spiritual experience for us. And I've been honored enough to be apparently okay, at least, of being able to preserve that environment and to be one of the people who gets to kind of help create that environment. So at the end of the day, bemused is always probably
Yes.
more an expression of vulnerability, and just having to deal with that, having to deal with the gravity of how meaningful that is, that people communicate that to me, that we share that together, and that I have the opportunity to be able to do something really special. So I take that very seriously. It means the world to me, and it's utterly changed. And it hasn't changed, but it is a gift over the last 30 some odd years that I've been doing this, to be able to stand here and go, wow, like, music is not just a popularity contest. It's not just a great song. There's a lot of service involved in it, and there's a lot of passion, and meeting the people that you're writing with and for is something that it just feels so much less about my ability to be great at something, but rather to be committed to doing something that is essentially like a community garden, right? It's just the part I play in that, and it's my honor and privilege to be able to do it.
Wow. Yeah. And that's very profound. I mean, thank you for that. I mean, looking around and seeing people singing singing the words to your songs, and knowing that each one of them has put you in chapters in their life. I mean, you are a part of so many people's lives, and that's a huge thing. I never really thought about it that way. So thanks for that. I mean, I also see, if you want to go to the technical part of behind this album, it's not just the lyrics and stuff, but I have seen a great improvement in your musicianship and in your phrasing, your timing on stage, and your interaction with the audience over the years. It's been a wonderful evolution, and I think that's people see that too. They're like, wow, like fine wine. There goes Jennifer Knapp. What do you think that you've improved on the most as an artist?
Yeah, well, I certainly feel like a stronger guitar player. I mean, it was, I would have said, just by virtue of playing for 30 years, that I'm, more solid and reliable. I'm just, just being like really functional, right? Like, just being really practical about the exercise of doing it. Like, it's a machine, right? That I know how it works, and I know how to play it. And I've played, a lot of guitars over the last few years, and listening and building a relationship with each instrument, to realize they do and teach you different things, which might sound weird, but they do. And I feel like I've definitely been more reliable in that space. And the outcome of that for me, or the benefit for that for me, is when I think of an idea or a song that I have kind of playing around in my head, I can hear that melody and then go and kind of manipulate my guitar in certain ways that I wouldn't be able to do before. I mean, when I was younger, and I'm particularly, I think what's fascinating about like, especially using like Kansas as kind of a landmark. I mean, these were among like the first maybe 15 songs that I ever wrote in my whole life. And that included that I'd only been playing guitar for maybe 2 or 3 years. So these were the best versions of my guitar playing that I could piece together at the time. And this whole process, actually, we've been doing, we're trying to piece together a bit of behind the scenes footage, and we drug up some old archived videos of me performing these songs. And man, I'm like, as a player, I'm on top of the beat. I'm like, I think that like on the stage, I thought that the tempo, like playing something really fast and aggressive, meant energy, right? And would move a room. And now I know how, weirdly, I know how to move a room, pull the tempo back so everybody can sit in a groove and hear it. Um, and the joy and the way that relates to my guitar playing is I now have like the muscle control to be able to do that. I mean, when you break down, like it's kind of funny because so yeah, I'd point to my guitar playing, but it's also like the full body experience. I mean, what I can do all at the same time, and I always get kind of a kick about kind of trying to explain to people when I'm doing a solo acoustic show and I'm in the middle of singing a song, how many things I'm actually doing at one time. So if you'll entertain me, if that's interesting to you, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. Because like as I'm you're playing guitar, right?
Sure. I got a lot of musicians listening in, so they'd probably be
Right.
really
Well, when you're
thrilled.
playing guitar, I've got my right hand, right, which is holding a pick and it's doing rhythm, and then I've got my left hand, which is doing chord structures, and it's having to remember what those chord structures are for all of those different moves. So those are happening at the same time. So I'm already rubbing my head and patting my belly at the same time, right? And playing this instrument, how hard I play it with my right hand, what the tempo is going on inside of my head, that has to be synced up. I'm thinking about now I'm also playing the instrument of my body and my voice. So I'm having to sing at the same time, be in tune. So I'm listening to my guitar. I'm having to remember lyrics. I'm doing all of that at the same time. But people often forget, and musicians often forget, that your microphone's actually an instrument as well. So I have a relationship with the microphone that's on the stage. Am I close to it? Am I far away from it? How hard am I going to sing into it so it sounds a particular way? And then I'm also thinking about, like I might have to change some settings on my guitar. So I've got a pedal board on the floor. And I'm also thinking about the room. I am now engaging with the audience as I'm performing and doing all of this at the same time. So, there's a lot that's going on. And I think when you have, and this is when I talk to other musicians too, like at the end of the day, nothing makes you a better, like you can sit around, like you have to have those times of it playing, like every time that you go out and play, it's more experience that you get to have. I think in like sports parlance, the game slows down, right? When you really know what you're doing, and the other things can feel extremely automatic. You can trust in your hands, so it doesn't feel like I'm having to think about all of those different components at the same time. I can move around. I can go, oh, my hands are fine. I'm having trouble remembering my lyrics tonight, so I'll concentrate on like pre-thinking my lyrics. And if anyone's ever gone to a show and watched me, because I do, it happens from time to time, I'll forget, right? I'll screw up a chord, or I'll forget the lyrics in the middle of the song, and I'll turn to the room going, oh God, what comes next, you guys? Because I can actually get so relaxed that I actually start in the middle of all of that. I can actually start zoning out and play and like thinking about my taxes, like, oh crap, my taxes are due tomorrow. Like I'm in the middle of the show singing a song and my brain is off doing something else. So it's fascinating to me about, when you really start to break that down, how many things you have to do. And I think what makes me kind of really happy about where I'm at with all, I'm getting ready to turn 50 next month. And when I sit there and go, oh my God, that's so old, right? I never thought I'd live to see 50. But I think the joy of that actually is sitting back and knowing when I go onto the stage every night is like, I actually know what I'm doing. It's not egotistical. It's just, man, I can have some fun tonight because I'm not afraid at all about how the whole thing's going to end, because I know that I'm going to, I know that I know what happens. I've had so many mistakes. I know what'll happen if I make a mistake. I know what'll happen if I have a hostile audience or a friendly audience. Those bits of experience go, oh, I wonder out of all the menu of all the experiences that I have tonight, what combination are going to show up tonight. And every night combinations different. So I definitely enjoy that. And I think the years of experience has made that a lot more enjoyable and surprisingly not boring.
No, I did notice that you seem to be having a lot more fun. There's a lot of other, like I said, I didn't really want to touch too much on all the things that precipitated or that contributed to you leaving in the end at the end of 2002 and leaving me high and dry, dadgummit. But I I muddled through and I didn't really want to focus on that as much, but I did want to say that obviously coming out nationally the way you did informed a lot of your life, a lot, including the music. But what surprised me is that as much blowback as you seem to get, and I live in a bubble here in California, no doubt. I mean, we it's a different world out here, and
And
of
it's a
course,
little bit different than like the mid South here in Tennessee, the
well,
way that people deal with LGBTQ issues.
exactly. So I grew up in Texas. I was actually born in Topeka, so we have that in common. But
Oh,
we
right
were born
on.
in Kansas. But I was raised in Texas, and so I'm aware of that. But I've lived here so long since I was young, since I was in my 20s. I wasn't getting that you were getting blowback, that it was causing you to really sour on the whole industry and people in general. Not that I can blame you, but I didn't know that. I mean, I thought everyone here seemed really supportive. In California, they're like, yeah, right on, okay. And I'm like, oh, you mean you actually did get some blowback? And I think I came to see you right after you came out at the Red Devil Lounge in San Francisco. This was
Oh, yeah. Cool show.
With Amy Courts. It was a good show, but you had a little more edge and a little more frustration and anger going on then. And I've seen that you've kind of mellowed. I mean, what's changed? The audience,
Certainly.
the core of your audience seems to have stayed with you, though. Surprisingly,
Yeah.
you get a lot more support than I have ever imagined you would.
Well, I think, yeah, you're talking the tour and that particular date that you're talking about is a very specific time frame because we were in the middle. I was actually on tour with Derek Webb and I were doing a co-bill show, and Amy Courts was opening up for us, and we started that tour before the press release came out about my sexual orientation. It was my first tour coming back after close to a decade. And yeah, so about halfway through the tour, the media, and we knew that this was going to happen. I'd prefer that would have, we'd kind of tried to, we'd tried to sort it out so that was the media was going to be before the tour went out, but it just, you can't always control any, it wasn't like we knew. I'd already done the interviews and they'd been sitting, they got bumped and they got bumped and they got bumped because there were more famous people than me coming out at the time. So what ended up happening is like right in the middle of the tour, that information absolutely changed the audience's response. So at the beginning of the tour, I had a lot of people that were like classic conservative CCM people that had no idea, and if they knew that I was gay, they weren't going to come to shows. And then the day that came out, we experienced a wildly different show. I mean, we were selling out every night, and then after that, it became a pretty, yeah, like then it became like a real challenge, like for even people who wanted to come out and see that were afraid of their Christian communities, just going to a show and seeing me would be akin to either A, coming out if they were gay, or siding with somebody that they'd been in their communities kind of told or admonished to walk
That
away from.
seems so
So
crazy. That's just crazy to
yeah,
me. I can't.
so yeah, and that was a really big blow. I mean, like I was in the middle of having to work, and we're doing 5 and 6 shows a week, and pulling a lot of miles, and having to process all of that kind of happening. And to a degree, I mean, I anticipated a degree of hostility. I don't think anything really surprised me. I think, like in retrospect, I think everything kind of went a lot nicer than I even had it scripted out in my mind. But yeah, at that point in time, I was definitely kind of, especially with my relationship with religion and the church, I didn't really know personally where I wanted to be in it. Like I didn't know, I mean, the things that I'm mad about, the things that I'm mad about, the things that I was mad about, I was definitely mad about. I didn't have any issue with. I was still trying to sort out how I wanted to approach and how I wanted to talk about religion. Did I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater? That seemed a little bit weird and wrong. And I was still having to figure out what that narrative meant for me. Like, what did that mean when I didn't want to abandon my own spiritual person, it seemed a little bit wrong to just erase part of my life, even though I might have been angry with it or mad or upset. I had to process that kind of in real time and while I was on stage. And I think that, you know, I can appreciate, especially like having gone through that and realizing that a lot of people got to see and witness probably, some days where, yeah, I was probably a little bit more edgy and, a little bit more crass on stage. The thing that I've always done has been kind of hard on my sleeve, and that what the consequence of, being kind of transparent with my audience and talking my way through that and taking the risk, I think, of assuming that my audience, I think over the years, what I've asked of my audience that persisted is like to be a partner with me in a conversation, right? That I'm not ever telling anybody what to do or what to think, and I'm certainly, I want to have a conversation, I want to have a dialogue, and I want to share that journey. And I think of what I learned in that time, like I felt the generosity of the people who were showing up during that period. I felt a sense of understanding and support in the middle of that. And at the same time, in the kindest of ways, night after night, people just coming up and telling me about their experiences with a lot of the songs off of Kansas, which I didn't want to play. I'll be honest. I couldn't do it. I was angry about that. I didn't even know, like I said, I didn't know what my relationship was going to be with those songs. I'd kind of written them off, but night after night, people like kind of saying, yeah, we understand and we know how you feel and we appreciate how you feel, and just genuinely giving hugs. Let me tell you a story about what this has meant to me. And kind of like, no, through the result of that was like, hey, if you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you're kind of throwing me out with it too, right? So that taught me a lot, like to kind of live in the tension of the places that I'd been and the things that I'd experienced, and that included, just any zealousness that I may have been embarrassed about that I had in my Christian experience, right? To be able to say, hey, I was at that place and I was at that time. And when you start to see people kind of try and erase that, that's when I was like, wait a second, you're trying to erase me. And the stories that people were telling me was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be an agent in the world that rewrites a history for other people that's meaningful to them. And that kind of those kinds of stories brought me back to actually entertaining Kansas as something that I shouldn't ignore. The songs on that, when I play them, there are very specific songs, like when I play Martyrs and Thieves, or every time, I mean this, every time I play it, every time I play Whole Again, every time I play Trinity, there's songs that when I pick up and play them with my guitar, they are expressions of something that lives inside of my body. I mean, it's just, I know when I play it that song came uniquely from me. It's just from me. And to be hostile to that, to say that I don't want to play it, or I don't want to hear that song anymore, or I don't want to feel that, is akin to cutting off my own arm, right? Just because I'm mad. So I understood and I related to that. And I think that was a very healing experience to go through. I was grateful that I had kind and generous people around me every single day, and generous audiences and stages that were willing to be as equally vulnerable with me as I had been with them, with this music, and in our lifetime and relationship together. And it's at the end of the day, I did not ever expect to have the people that grew up listening to any of this music ever return a gift back to me. And not just say, hey, we want more because you need to create more, and you need to be a machine and create music. It was like, no, we heard this, we share it, this is ours. And I think there's something really special about that. So that part of that is the connective force is the music, but I think it's the people in the long run. And to a degree, yeah, Kansas and the music that we connected with in that space that taught us, I think, all to be able to communicate that there's value, and for us, that there's value in us being vulnerable. There's valuable in leaving space for people to kind of sort these things out and to work these things out, because you have to just go through them. You just have to live through them. And the people who love you and care about you are going to give you enough space to be able to do that, and enough grace to be able to say it's going to be messy some days. And I'm grateful for that. And I even now when I go out on stage, like post pandemic has been kind of a new season uh, of that. I think a lot of people at home had kind of healed in some of those ways, and I think a lot of us were a little bit softer. After that, we hadn't really chucked the baby out with the bathwater. There are some of us who had found a way to kind of reconcile what experience we'd had in those faith zones, and to keep the things that were really meaningful to us and not throw them away just because there was some bad stuff kind of weeded out in it. So just kind of go through, do the inventory and say, this works, this doesn't, this is hurting me, this isn't. This is a really great gift and I don't want to lose it. And I absolutely attribute to the joy that I have in my career now as being so critically invested by the people who listen to the music today. So when I'm packing up my gear, I'm thinking about, the folks that have been supporting me through the years, because it really did feel like a gift. I'm not sure I would have gotten through that if people weren't still saying, hey, like, we're still connecting. So I'm still out there playing, and it's just a really, really humbling experience.
And people are still, my daughter wasn't even born when Kansas came out. She was one of those.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks. No, how do you think I feel? I'm older than you, so I'm like, oh,
right.
So she's 23 now, but she really appreciates. I think the same things about the music that I did. The honesty and you were always being true to yourself, and you were exploring things the way you were. It's basically, if you listen to Kansas, it's kind of your biography, on an album of how you're coming to deeper spiritual realizations and how you're growing as a person. And that's what made it so beautiful. And I could literally talk to you all day about just this album because it's that important. But I want to tell you, for me, it came at the I think for a lot of us, it came at the right time in our lives, when I was going through some amazingly difficult times in my personal life and in my career. And, I would sit in the car and listen to that over and over and over again. Like,
amazing.
I think 20 or 30 times in a row, the entire album back to back to back. Sometimes I couldn't go to work unless I listened to at least 2 or 3 songs off Kansas. Then I would get the courage to get up out of the car, get out of the parking lot and go to work. So that was one reason why I wanted to talk to you, and also to tell people how they can help you with this particular project. I know that you were having people contribute and things like that. What can they do right now to make Kansas version 2, or whatever you're calling it? What are you calling it? Kansas
we're calling it Kansas 25.
Okay.
Is the name of the project. So it was a crowdsourced, it was a crowdsourced project, so crowdfunded. So we did the Kickstarter campaign early in 24, and that's kind of done and dusted. So the people who did that are going to have access to what will probably be a relatively limited release of vinyl. We'll have a few excess left over. So if you're a vinyl fan and you're interested in that, we will have some available, but it's going to be, and you weren't involved in the Kickstarter campaign, they'll be available that way. So as far as support, this is just, I would say that, it doesn't really need any support. Of course, we're always really glad for people to find out about it. Yeah, word of mouth is always really great. And, May 5th, I don't know when we're going to be on the air, but May 17th, I believe, is the day. It's the third Friday of May, I believe, is the official release date for the record. So the digital will be available in all of the places. Apple, iTunes, Spotify, everything like that. But yeah, word of mouth is always really great. It's genuinely, I don't have any huge expectations for it. It's, if it were a brand new record and brand new songs, obviously we'd be wanting to, top some charts and sell a lot of records. But really, I think this is I don't want to undersell it. I think this is, for the people who know it and love it, this is, a gift back to say, hey, I realize you've kind of, worn out the one from the last 25 years, and I hope this one might serve you in a little bit more unique way for the next 25. I think they're 2 different records in a weird way. And I think they'll, it would be like, I think it would just be fun to me if people are just enjoying that and finding that this is reflective of the next of where we've been in the last 25 and reflective of the new thing kind of going forward and where we are now. I genuinely just hope to see that out of it. And I think outside of that, I mean, I do have a nifty kind of thing. I was like, it'd be kind of nice. I mean, one of the ulterior motives in doing this record, I can say, is that because of my sexual orientation and coming out, I think there's an interesting side of Christianity in the US in particular, and inside of Christian culture, that tends to often erase the anomalies that are difficult to contend with, right? So for example, before I came out and even while I was gone, it was like, oh yeah, Jennifer Knapp and this record, and was a really great Christian music artist that everybody knows. And then now, and a new and up and coming artist would be like, compared to me, my name might be mentioned in when it was appropriate to mention my name in that. And then after I came out, it's kind of rewriting that history. It's almost like I never existed and this work never existed. And, I can take that personally, but that's fine, whatever. Like I've done that work. So there's no real economic loss to that in some sense. But the effect of that is like erasing people. Like you can't erase people's experience, So putting this record back on the map is a way of kind of looking at that like that blacking out and the refusal to say artists or to speak about artists who kind of move on from the history or the narrative of conservative Christian evangelicalism, going, no, you can't erase us. You can't stop writing about us. We're still living and we're still existing. So it would be fun to me in that sense if, it showed up on, if it bumped and hit like the iTunes playlist, for when we release it in May. That'd be really fun, just to remind people going, this really is one of the records that we talk about when we talk about, contemporary Christian music in our lifetime. And it's not really an ego thing. I don't know how to express that in a way of going, don't let people write you off. If we've moved on or we're not necessarily hanging out in conservative evangelical circles, the word on the street right now is like deconstruction. People are deconstructing that experience, trying to figure out what it meant to be part of the youth group when you were a kid, and then now how to make sense of what you want to do with your spiritual life when the church isn't really where you want to be, maybe. Or, how do you contemplate God in a world when maybe religion means Trumpism to you? So there are those challenges of being able to say, hey, we have a right to be, any of us, all of us have a right to be able to have the soundtrack that actually does represent us, that we have the right to create ourselves to a certain degree. And I don't want to get into some big theological discussion about that statement and how
now that you
offensive
have
that
your
might be
master's. Yeah.
I do have my master's in theology. So I realize like how weird that sounds to a lot of people inside of religious space, but we are collaborators in who we are. I mean, to me, and this is my theological note for Kansas a little bit. When I was writing that record, and I think one of the joys when I look back on it, why people connect to it, is because the girl who wrote it was trying to figure out how to make sense of all of these, Christian ideas, all of these theological things, all of these do's and don'ts inside of Christian religion and culture that were telling me what I was supposed to look like in order to be a good Christian, right? But somewhere in there, what I heard was, what does my life mean in the eyes of God? And those are two different questions. Who am I? For me, one of the things that I go back to is as a psalm, right? Who am I that God, who are we that God will be mindful of us, right? Who are you? Who am I? I didn't know who I was. And even now, I'm constantly asking that question. I'm constantly trying to figure out who I am on this day. Not that it's anything new, because we've talked about it. There are things that I know that I do well, things that I'm happy to do, and things that I love singing. I love playing guitar. I know what I am when I go out, and I'm happy to do that at its fullest. And I'm confident in that. Who am I as a human being? Who am I in my sexual orientation? Who am I in my relationships? I think Kansas was a kid doing that work, that spiritual work of going, who am I that God would be mindful of me? Because I feel humbled that God sees me. I just don't know why God loves me so much, because I don't know what I see. And to be able to be involved in that work and to make an invitation to that work, I think is one of the theological questions that I didn't realize was so I didn't realize at the time that I was doing that was a huge that was a huge spiritual move to do. I didn't understand the maturity of it. I don't know where it came from. I understand now the hostility that sometimes conservative religious communities can have in that kind of work, because that's one of the challenges, I think, in faith-based communities, right? What a Christian looks like versus what does it mean to be using this tradition to help me in my spiritual life. Those are two different approaches. And I see now, like, the conflict that I didn't know was coming because that wasn't the same approach that I was living in and with or being encouraged to have. But it's the one that I look back going, I'm still doing that work today. That's still connecting to me, going, wow, I'm actually really proud. I might change some lyrics, or I might cringe a little bit or be uncomfortable at the youthfulness that I might see in a moment in time. But I recognize myself in that work today, and I recognize the things that I haven't given up on after all this time. And I recognize in a community of people the things that we haven't given up on. That grace isn't, when we talk about, like, in a religious language or in Christianity, if we talk about grace, we don't just mean, hey, water off a duck's back. We mean understanding something about ourselves that might be hard to live with, that somebody gives us a little bit of space and time and room to grow, and shares with us, and the joy that we might be not a better person or a good person, but that in that experience, the person will have a more fruitful life, that something will be beneficial for them. Not that they'll look like a better Christian or act like a better Christian, but if I'm struggling with something, that somebody sees that I'm suffering and hopes that, and is with me, and is a companion with me, to go on a journey with me, to allow me to work my way through that, to discover something that's actually really truly liberating. And when I mean, again, that's another kind of Christian culture and Christian tradition word, liberation. But to be free means to be unshackled. It means to no longer be living in the fear of what we are not or what we have done, but to be able to anticipate all the things that we imagine in our mind, actually being able to live into that. And I think that's a beautiful thing that started 25 years ago in that record. And it started in a room with just a kid and her guitar and a Bible and a bunch of Christian language and thought floating around, and really asking some really hard questions. And the things that I've been so honored to know that this is actually not a bad path to take, to be able to ask those hard questions, to be able to give oneself grace, to be able to really keep hope in the value of ourselves, and the worthiness and the dignity that we have, and that something greater than ourselves might see in us. So that is a joy to be able to share. It's a joy to be able to have a community that shares and sees in that, and to have an artifact like some music that helps us kind of say and do and experience the things that we don't actually always have the words for, to help us, mediate that and share between us. Has just been a privilege to be a part of.
Wow. The Reverend Jennifer Knapp. That's amazing. That's an amazing, and because I'm going to end on this, that is beautifully, beautifully stated. And I think you've actually hit the nail on the head there. That is actually what I saw in the album was your attempt to try to bring all that together in your own life. I'm going to ask you this question though. Somebody asked me this: is how good have you become at receiving love? A lot of times we think we're put on this planet to give, and certainly we do have responsibilities, and we're giving music. I'm here to give. I'm here to be an advocate. I'm here to be this. But I think it's really deeper than that, and we're put here to receive love, and that seems to be the hardest part for people. I think this is what is wrong a lot in evangelicalism. A lot of times is that a lot of the people that are lashing out, they have never learned to receive this great gift, because we don't understand the mechanics of grace properly. And I don't know, how have you learned to receive the love that you're getting?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, it took me a long time to do that. I wish I could build a roadmap for everybody to go, oh, this is how you do it. But I think part of it is just in the recognition of that, because I think a long way down the road, I think that was probably like in my own emotional development and spiritual development. I think that was a thing that got unlocked several years after I got done asking the question, basically, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And thinking it was like, all these things that you can fix. But receiving love, I think someone there is like, how about we start here instead of, like micromanaging everything, just going, are you open to others? And that, it's very understandable why it's hard for us to do that, right? Because to be open to love means that you have to invariably open the door, and opening the door means opening the door to strangers. I mean, you can't always control what comes in, so we're afraid of what might come in, right? Or even worse, opening ourselves up to love, and it also means that you're anticipating it, which means that you may not get it in the way that you imagine, and that's a very that's a very distressing feeling. um it, it, yeah, I mean, I think that's been, to me, one of the keys of joy and happiness in my life, is to kind of take that absolute risk to be able to do that and to learn how to do that. To I've been now with my partner for over 20 years, and I remember the sheer terror that I had when I began to open myself up to that relationship. Um, and that was one of the first times in my life that I genuinely just said out loud. And I think this is, for me, if I was going to say one of the key components to me, if I even remotely had one, and like what it means to be opening oneself up to love and to receiving it, was that I never asked for it. And that was terrifying. Like, I just remember that move of just being able to say, listen, I want to be loved by you. Your love means something to me. I need love now in this moment. I don't need money. I don't need food. I want to be embraced. I don't want to be held. That will make me feel better right now. Will you be with me right now? And to whoever that is. And like you're talking about, like the hostilities that we have, you run into a stranger on a street, right? Or you break a little bit late for a four-way sign and somebody's cursing you, that kind of hostility, to me, often, like, I always remind myself, is like, oh, whenever I run into that hostility, how can I express my non-threatening, how can I be non-threatening to this human being? How can I be a ray of sunshine in this moment? What hurt is speaking from this human being right now? Like, those kinds of things, not everybody wants it, but I think one of the hardest parts of that journey was to just actually admit that I needed it, admit that I needed love, admit that there were places that I wanted to receive it from. And that opened me up to a whole host of other issues. What relationships do I need to amend and learn about building good relationships? How do I, what kind of work do I really need to do? I mean, I think that's kind of the irony of when you say, when we talk about opening ourselves up to love and receiving love and being willing to accept that, how much work is actually involved on our end. It's not just other people not giving us love. Love is everywhere once you start kind of looking for those ways. When you take the time to know, what is the love that I'm going to take, that I'm going to, like, sit in this quiet space, right? And then observe my world around me, and then recognize where love is fruitful. Where is love happening? Where are the people who know what that is and recognize that? And I think it's when we quiet ourselves, we can do some of that work. We can actually go out and find that love. It is there. That love exists. It's not just something that you have to beg for and demand that somebody can give that to you. It actually exists. You just have to be a participant in that and be open up to it. So, I mean, that to me, absolutely, is one of the most life-changing things that I didn't realize, that even in my early years, the kind of hostility or the brokenness that I felt, part of the healing that went along with that was being able to be loved, and that I was lovable, or to being able to just admit that. And that was very much part of my early religious experience, is that I was lovable. And that's kind of the thing. You have to get out of the way of your own self and to recognize that you are worthy of being loved, even in the middle of whatever thing that pops up into your head that says no. So that's work. That's an individual work. And it's very difficult, and it's very easy to find all of the reasons inside of yourself to say, these are the things that or all the reasons why somebody shouldn't love me. It's easy to look out into the world and find all of the enemies against you, but it is an entirely different word to look for excuses to why people shouldn't love you or don't actively participate that, and change and flip that script to say, to recognize that we are already agents of love in and of ourselves. And if we don't know how to love ourselves, and we don't know how to love others, and and on it goes. So to be able to flip that script and expecting to see all of the things that support our negative position, to be able to actually look up and look for the things that expect and anticipate the positive things that are already in existence, and begin participating in that way. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, and that is a huge deal. And when you think of it in divine terms and in spiritual terms, it's the same thing. A lot of times we can't say. I think Mark Hurd wrote a lyric one time. I am a fortunate soul to have known divine love, and I think it's hard for a lot of people to get to that place. And I really appreciate that, all that you've done. I don't think you even realize the impact you've made in the world, Jennifer Knapp, in so many ways. And I want people to read your book too, if they get a chance, which is called Facing the Music.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. So if you want to know more about Jennifer Knapp, you should go on there. Also check her live stream, because I bet you she's going to be promoting this Kansas 25 some live streaming on Facebook and maybe some other things. So
yeah, and I will. It's worth saying too that we have a really lovely community. I'm doing a lot on for those of you who are aware of like Patreon. So in Patreon, I got patreon.com/Jennifer Knapp. Or if you just go to my website, jenniferknapp.com, of course, you'll see all of the social media and digital things that are happening. But Patreon is something that I really enjoy. It's obviously it's a little kind of inside community that you can be a part of. I do online shows every month. I'm doing definitely the most intimate things that I do and talk about are actively happening inside of Patreon. There are a lot of other, Patreon for a lot of creators. There are a lot of people who do a lot of things like, putting out a song every week or things like that. I don't really do that. Or my Patreon's a lot more social. So every month I have a social hour, which everybody can hang out in, and we just have a Zoom call and people show up and we just talk, and it's really fun. And
drink some
of
single
course
malt.
I'm doing. Yeah, I'm often doing my online shows once a month. I have every second Thursday of the month. I do an online show at Patreon, and I'm usually sipping on some kind of whiskey. I'm getting ready to actually add a theological kind of hangout. So not really a Bible study, but just kind of getting, like we've been talking today, getting into issues. I've got a lot of people inside of that community that have just been saying, hey, let's just get together and really talk about those things, and be able to challenge me with some questions that I'm really looking forward to kind of putting my theologian hat to, and kind of offering that service to the people inside of that space as well. So you don't know until you come and hang out. Come hang out with me on a Patreon social hour. I do it all the time, and it's super fun. And that community is always kind of growing and changing and shifting. But that's, of all the things, if you don't ever get to hang out with if you're in a weird pocket of the world where I don't ever get to go, Patreon, I'm hanging out there all the time.
Yeah, it seems like the real deal. And also, she is going to be doing a tour. I noticed you come into LA again.
Yeah, well, I'm actually kind of a weird thing that I'm doing this year in September. I'm doing a 7-day cruise to Alaska. So if anyone's interested in being, on a cruise ship, I'm going to do 3 shows throughout that week, and it's going to be there's a little pocket of Jen Knapp special kind of ticket you can buy on that Alaska cruise. So details are on my website, but that's all to say is because I'll be shipping out of Seattle in September, I'm piecing together a West Coast run early August and September along the West Coast again. So for sure, I know that's one of the things on the calendar this year.
So I'm excited. Thank you, Jennifer Knapp, again for being my guest. I know you got tons of stuff to do. Like I said, I could talk to you, listen to you forever. Thank you so much for everything and all the great shows that I've been able to see over the years, and just the really fantastic music. You are one of a kind, and we are so glad that we're living on the same planet at the same time with you.
Well, I appreciate our conversation today, Tammy. Thank you for having me.
You've done it. You've faced the fear and triumphed. Thanks for listening to the Safe Space Podcast with Tammy D. For episode information or to suggest a guest or topic, go to saferpodcast.com.